Honestly, after this episode, you're going to wish it was Christmas every day, as we tell you how to take the gold, frankincense and myrrh out of your business. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6- and 7-figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancock, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So, do you know what is really, really annoying, Claire?
I do know, because you've been going on about this all bloody morning.
Yeah. It's when I come home and I've spent the last 5 minutes wandering around the house trying to find my slippers. And I went round once and I went round again. And I'm thinking, they're not where I left them. And then I'm like, oh, where are they?
On my feet.
Yeah, on your feet.
Cold.
On your feet. And do you know what really annoys me about this is you threw out my other pair of slippers because you said I had to buy new ones when we could have both had a pair if we kept them both.
Turns out we should both have slippers.
Yeah.
In fact, we were in, where were we the other day? And they had like an electric foot warmer thing to sit under your desk. And I think we need one of those because...
in the range, and you actually just put your feet in. It was only like 20 quid. And you put your feet in this like slit in a pillow is the only way I can describe it. And you plug it in and it gets your...
I know from being in an office with other people, there is a big temperature divide, normally between the men and women, let's face it. But additionally, the heating just never seems to quite penetrate under the table. So you always end up with cold feet and normally cold hands too. So I'm really not liking this time of year. We've been quite lucky it's not got cold, but it's really kicked in over the last few days.
It has. And on to my next subject is, and this is a bit ranty, but I rang you straight away this morning as I left the house, didn't I? And tell people about my obsession with leaves, because it did start.
We actually call you the CLO, the Chief Leaf Operator.
Chief Leaf Officer.
Oh, yeah, Chief Leaf Officer.
So we live in quite a leafy area and a lot of trees. And basically, I try and keep on top of my leaf dropping. Well, I left this morning. This really winds me up.
Sorry, I'd just like to say this is the dullest conversation ever about leaves.
I'm bringing this back to business and the economy because this really, really, really winds me up. I leave this morning. Leave this morning,
yeah.
Don't pun there.
Boom, boom.
Leave this morning and literally turn my corner and there is 3 guys and a truck from the council literally cleaning all the leaves. And there is so many of them by hand. They've got a wheelie bin and like a couple of shovels and there's 3 of them and they're filling a lorry up with leaves. Now, I listen to huge amounts of content from very, very innovative people. And, you know, if you believe what we're told, we are on the cusp of AI taking everyone's job. Somebody said this morning that accountants and lawyers won't exist in 10 years.
You came
but
home at lunchtime
hang on
and
a
told me
minute.
I'll be out of business.
They're happy to levy these wonderful additional taxes on us, as they've done recently, but we can't possibly have a machine that would take out the 3 people that are lifting by hand those leaves, and we can have a machine. I mean, frankly, by now the machine should be completely driverless, not even have a driver on it.
I'm going to anger you a little bit more, Simon, because prior to the men with their wheelbarrows and brooms and spades arriving, they actually sent a road sweeper around to collect all the leaves into one place and move them away from the curb. So the ironic thing is we send a man around, or possibly a woman, around driving the road sweeper, and then we send men to sweep it up. So I don't understand why we're not just sending a giant Hoover around. But
I'm bringing this back to being like deadly serious here. I am like frightened for our country. You know, we talk about we haven't seen productivity for 2 decades now. We are way behind the rest of the world, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, we went 60 years ago through an agricultural into industrial age where we moved away from people doing things by hands to machines doing it. We're now moving into AI. Why have we got 3 people going out collecting leaves? I don't get it.
No, I don't get it either, but probably because there isn't a giant leaf sucker upper machine.
Of course there is. In Dubai, they have a machine that lays the roads. So don't tell me that somebody can't make a machine that collects leaves. So,
well, who knows? Maybe one of our listeners has got one, or
anyway,
has a business that makes them.
If you're as wound up by this situation,
by leaf
as
collection,
I'm sure we
Simon, I don't think there is anybody else out there that is as wound up about leaves as you are.
No, I think what I'm wound up about is public sector productivity at a time when they're hiking some of the most horrific taxes on businesses that I've ever seen. So that's my rant over, but I think it's a disgrace. Anyway, should we move on to this week's news story of the week? So this week, in I'd like to say slightly light-hearted sense, but it is a slightly light-hearted story. This is the story of an entrepreneur who every year sells advent calendars. They're priced at £109. And this year she's had all of her business and her online adverts cloned by rogue Chinese firms. And they've effectively gone out selling her calendars, her brand, even posting social media clones of her and her videos out there, taking buyers' monies and then simply not delivering the products.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible to be in that situation. Apparently, just go through some of the stats here. 121 rogue websites popped up for her brand.
Just for her brand?
Just for her brand. Over 100 Amazon listings popped up, just selling her calendar and her brand. Like I said, they stole her social media videos, pretending to be her. Some of the videos they cloned got over 900,000 views.
This is the problem with this day and age, isn't it? It's like social media, it's become an online marketplace, and it just doesn't have the protection in place to allow it to be an online marketplace. You know, if you're anybody on social media, any sort of influencer, anybody with a strong following or a public profile of any type, you can almost guarantee that your Facebook page or your Instagram page or something has at some point been cloned. And it might not even be in this instance where somebody was basically pretending to sell these advent calendars but just taking the money and never delivering anything. Often they're being cloned by people that are trying to sell like cryptocurrency and these, like pyramid schemes and things like that, trying to get people to put their money in. It is shocking the amount of fraud that is happening in the world right now. Absolutely shocking. Yeah. I think the first one of these to hit the headlines was actually a bit of a better known business called Space NK, and their Christmas advent calendar normally retails at about £250 and it was for sale for £30. So on the one hand you can understand why people flock to it and so many people got caught out, but at the same time, would something really be selling at 90% off? You've got to have some personal accountability for being so silly.
I mean, there's two people to try and protect her, isn't there? There's obviously the consumer who's just getting absolutely screwed and scammed because they're just paying their money over getting nothing. So in this particular instance,
they don't get nothing though, because they just apply to their bank. They say they've been a victim of fraud. They do a chargeback, and lo and behold, it's actually the banks that are paying the price for that. So
I guess so. Therefore, the damage is more on the business owner whose reputation is done, basically. So, this year, she'll be screwed over. She's got a great reputation previously, and from next year, she's not going to have a chance.
Yeah, people will just be scared to buy from her.
Yeah, I mean, she's selling at £109. It's like a stationary advent calendar, really, really popular. Yeah, the all of these rogue websites were selling at £30, so hugely cheaper, which is hooking people in. Obviously, I don't know why the story says the average victim lost £55. Maybe they bought more than one. On average,
I don't know.
That must be the reason. But so your tips to avoid if you're a business owner, what can you do?
I think the first one is
do anything?
There are a few things you can do, actually. I think firstly, you've got to buy as many domains as possible. Actually, domain names are really cheap to buy for your business. So the more domains, so most of these brands do it by buying a domain similar to yours. So like with Space NK, for example, I think they're like spacenk.com, and the fraudsters set up a website, space.nk. And it's just little things like that. If you think about all the different ways that somebody might type your name into Google, and just buy those domains, because it just reduces the opportunity for somebody to do that. You can trademark your name as well, because then somebody can't use it. I mean, obviously these are fraudsters, so that are they that worried about committing an offence? But at least possibly reduces the opportunity for people to do it.
I guess it doesn't help them, but the reality is what they're doing is, do the domains even matter? Because they buy the domain, but they just put a load of paid for advertising behind it. So they put pay-per-click behind it, they put it on an advert. It's just a link to the domain. Would you as the consumer check enough to think, that domain's nothing to do with the business? Probably not. And that's the challenge, isn't it?
And that's the difficult thing is the consumers, unfortunately, if they're not educated about this. I think if you come from a business world, or anybody's ever tried to do this to your business, or you've worked in a big business and had cybersecurity training or anything like that, you start to think about these things. But the vast majority of the general public are just buying on TikTok marketplace and not thinking anything about the domain name or the email address that anything's come from. I think the final thing that you can do is that if you ever think anybody's doing anything like passing off your business as an opportunity to commit fraud or something like that, then you can report it to the National Cyber Security Centre, the NCSC. There's just like a simple form online that you can fill out. But the problem with that is they literally get, I'd imagine, like thousands of reports every day. Will it be dealt with?
Do you think they're effective?
No.
I doubt it.
No. That's the difficulty, is that actually there's very little you can do about this.
And I guess, like you say, we spoke at the beginning, in our chit chat about the rise of AI, and it's going to be able to clone these things automate cloning of this. If you're a scammer and you get really smart with your AI, it's just going to be all automated. So, I mean, how are people going to avoid this? I don't know.
Personally, what I would like to see is, I think, if you go on like social media and you have like this blue tick effect where you're authenticated, I would like to see
That's a good idea.
Businesses, when you input your card details or pay with Apple Pay or anything like that, there should be like this blue tick process where the card manufacturers are authenticating that this is a legitimate business. They're not impersonating anybody or doing anything illegal. Now, I know that's very difficult to do, but actually, the likes of Clinique or Charlotte Tilbury, big companies like that would absolutely pay to have this blue tick effect, and it would make the checkout process smoother. And you could just provide something simple like, I don't know, like a copy of your passport and some information from Companies House to validate your business or something like that, that would just really help to cut down on this. Because if you went through a checkout process, if you thought you were on the Tesco's website and you went through a checkout process and PayPal popped up with a warning saying, we don't recognise this business, it would make you think twice.
Do you think, I think it's a great idea, and I do think that I think this is a great business opportunity. I suspect that's exactly what will happen. A bit like an ISO something 1001 or whatever, that online retailers at some point will have a sticker on their checkout to say that they're authorised by something, or a bit like gas safety check. You can check the gas register to make sure they're Corgi registered, as it used to be called. I think it's the only way it can go, can't it? Well,
it started to happen a little bit. I don't know if you noticed when you now make payments through the bank, but they now at least authenticate that the name matches to the account details. And that's actually a fairly modern addition to the banking system, which is absurd that we're in 2004 and they're only just doing that.
Yeah. So we always sometimes look at only the negatives, but like talking about AI, actually AI could end up, the plus side to it means that it could end up automating those check processes really quickly and easily for authentication and improving that if it's used in the right way. So as much as it could have those negatives, actually it could end up, chucking out some phenomenal positives to be able to solve this issue as well.
Yeah, I do think that the banks and big businesses need to be taking the lead on this. And, actually a lot of our banking platforms, the systems and processes are quite legacy and they haven't really changed. We've had some challenger banks like Tide and Metro and people like that sort of pop up, but they're changing it a little bit, but not drastically. And I do think that it's far too easy for financial fraud to happen now. And I think that something significant has got to change. It's literally like billions and billions of dollars is being lost every year around the world to fraud, and it's just got out of control.
Yeah. So there you go. So if you have bought a stationery calendar and it hasn't arrived yet, I'm sorry that we were the ones to break the news to you.
Yeah, make sure you do a chargeback on your credit card or something.
Anyway, let's move on to this week's deep dive. So, Claire, how do we give ourselves as directors the gift of Christmas this Christmas? And I know it's quite early-ish to be talking about Christmas, but the reason we've done this is that this gives people a chance to plan ahead of Christmas as to what they do for both themselves and their employees, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Call me Mrs. Claus, because I am about to dish out the tax-free Christmas presents for directors and employees of businesses.
Ooh.
So, yeah, this is one of two things that come up frequently when I take on a new client, and I always go through their accounts and have a look to see if there's any little like tax areas where they're just not taking advantage of some of the freebies that are available. There aren't many. There are not many left these days, but these are two of the biggies that do make a big difference. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a Christmas party.
Now,
yes, you got caught out with this.
I got caught out with this, didn't I? Because when, years ago, when we first started the business, I took all the stuff out for a massive party, spent an absolute fortune, and then you decided to hit me with a massive tax bill, didn't you?
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. I thought it was all just like expensible. So where did I go wrong, and how did I end up on egg on my face?
Yeah. So unfortunately, staff entertaining, so things like Christmas parties, days out, even things like team building events, it's all actually
simply not included as a business expense, is it?
Well, you can include it as a business expense from a corporation tax perspective, but it's actually a taxable benefit. So HMRC expects you to basically put it on a P11D, and the employee pays tax on it and the employer pays national insurance on it. But your employees obviously wouldn't be very happy if you invited them to a Christmas party and then gave them a tax bill at the end of it. So there are a couple of ways that you can get around that.
I should have known this as well. Do you know why? Because back in my corporate days when I used to do expense claims forms, they used to have everything this side of one column, but staff entertaining used to be in a slightly different column because they wanted the numbers to be split out, and that's exactly why, because the accountants of the business wanted to know the difference, didn't they?
And actually, pretty much everybody's bookkeeping that I look at, they do not split out staff entertaining. They just have what they call entertaining, and everything goes in there. Entertaining for external customers, suppliers and staff, and it really does need to be split out separately, because if you do get a audit from HMRC on payroll, they will look at payroll and benefits, and they will expect to see staff entertaining classified separately.
Now, if you put it down as a staff meeting, is that an expense?
Well, this is a really grey area. This is a really grey area. Generally,
quote unquote business meeting, Stella Artois.
Yeah, so no.
Boris Johnson, we were drinking, but we were working.
No, so actually, HMRC generally say that the cost of eating and drinking is a factor of being alive, not a factor of being employed. And therefore, they generally say that they wouldn't expect a business to be paying for food and drink for their team. The difference is, if you're away overnight, for example, and you can't provide yourself with food and drink. The other example that they do give is they say, if you're in a meeting, for example, and it's impractical for you to end the meeting to go and get lunch.
Right.
They give an example of that. But that doesn't mean that you can choose to have a meeting from 12 till 2 at a nice restaurant and then just say, we're having a business lunch. It doesn't work like that. That would be classed as staff entertaining.
Okay, excellent.
So let's bring this back to the Christmas party. So the reason why I'm saying that you should do this for the Christmas party is because there's actually I'm going to refer to it as an annual allowance of £150 per employee that you can do on staff entertaining before it becomes a taxable benefit.
Okay.
Now, the rules around this are really quite ridiculous. Firstly, the event should be an annual event, which is why we say generally use it for your Christmas party. But if you do a summer barbecue, if you do an Easter barbecue, as long as the same event happens every year, then you can use the £150 for an annual event.
Okay. So it's not specific to Christmas.
It's not specific for Christmas.
We would encourage you to use it for Christmas because it's the right time of year to do it.
Only do a Christmas annual event.
Yeah.
And it must be open to all employees. So you can't just say, let's take the senior team out or take the directors out.
Okay.
It's got to be open to all employees.
Fine.
Okay. And the £150 per head covers all of the costs. So it's including VAT, and it covers the costs, if you took your team out, I don't know, if you went, what are you going to do? You might go bowling or to like an escape room or something, then you'll go for dinner and drinks afterwards. So you add up all of those costs, plus any travel and accommodation needs to go into there. So you add up the total cost of the event and divide it by the number of heads. And if it's less than £150, then you can use this allowance.
Okay.
Now, the kicker here is you can't get the £150 allowance and then pay tax on anything over. If the event goes over £150 per head, then the entire event becomes a taxable benefit.
Right.
Which is really annoying. So if you spend literally £151 per head, the entire event
becomes
becomes
taxable. That says, and
absolutely.
So you've got to divide the entire event by the number of people, and you've got to keep it within that. Otherwise, it doesn't become claimable as a business expense at all.
Yes.
Interesting.
So one thing that is often overlooked by many people with this is that you can take your partner or a spouse, as long as they're
Can you?
Yeah, as long as they're a close family member. So when, for example, we had a very small business and it was just us, we went out together, didn't we? Which is quite nice because we weren't actually going to have a Christmas party, but we were like, well, we'll go out for dinner and put it through the business because it's a genuine business expense. So if you do want your staff to bring partners, again, it's got to be open to all partners. You can't say just this person's bringing a partner or just that person. As long as it's open equally to all employees, generally the same rule, the same invitation, the same entitlement, then the £150 a head applies per person attending the event.
Okay, great.
You do have to bear in mind where a couple of people might get caught out with this is if you book, like, I don't know, I've done an event, like one time we went into London and we had like a private boat down the Thames and there was a fixed price for that boat. And then we originally cost it on 20 people, but only 14 people came, and therefore that pushed the cost over £150.
Okay, I see.
So it's the amount of people that attend the event. So just be a bit careful with that. But essentially, it means...
How do you keep a record of that so that if you get inspected, they would know?
You just have a list of attendees.
Okay.
So literally, like most businesses will now store their receipts digitally, just literally attach a list of people that attended the event. It's as simple as that. That's all you've got to do.
Great.
So that's your Christmas party. Don't go over £150 per head. Actually, £150 doesn't go very far these days, particularly if you've got to pay for like accommodation for people.
Is that like £150 allowance like transferable? So let's say you didn't want to do a Christmas party, because lots of people, I mean, like often a lot of my stuff from various sorts of people like often don't even want to socialise with their people at work. Sometimes, and you should do it because you should bring them together so that you get a business benefit out of it as well. But can you reward that money in a different way, like some gift vouchers or pay for their Christmas shopping or anything like that, or is it just the Christmas party?
We'll move on to that in a minute, but the £150 specifically applies to staff events.
Okay, so
and
this
entertaining
particular,
events.
we're ring-fence this at the moment.
But it's not one event. So my last company that I worked for, we gave each department a £50 budget per quarter per person, and some people would just get takeaway in. You know, like a couple of times a month, they'd just get a takeaway in. And then each time they got takeaway, it would be classed as an individual event. And as long as the individual events don't add up to more than £150 per year, that's fine.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So we've got our Christmas party sorted, but now we really want to get the spirit of Christmas going. So we're going to give away some free Christmas gifts here.
Okay, this is the bit I want to know.
Yeah.
Free gifts.
So I'm going to give you the rules as to what you can do in terms of Christmas presents and giving gifts to employees and also to directors, because that's really what we're here for, is looking after number one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's called giving yourself the gift of Christmas.
So there is
that's why I came today, you know.
There is a really boring piece of HMRC legislation about trivial benefits. And basically, something is a trivial benefit if it's less than £50. It is not cash or can't be exchanged for cash, so like a cheque.
Okay.
And it can't be given as a reward for performance.
Okay.
So as long as those criteria are met, then you can give your employees gifts up to £50.
So these are random acts of kindness that you can just like sprinkle on employees.
Absolutely.
Just to do with Christmas or at any time?
So we call these TNTs, tiny noticeable things. And when somebody does something, so they might do
TNT.
They might just like do something really fabulous that catches my attention, or they might, come in and start early, or make me a nice cup of tea or something like that. Just a little way of saying thank you. Here's a TNT. And it could be anything. Sometimes it's just, here's a box of chocolates, here's a bottle of wine. And other times it's
gift vouchers,
an Amazon voucher. Yeah, £50. Now, this
is a really, just pause you there, because I really like this, just like as a way of managing the team and the motivation and various other things. And given the fact that this is a true business expense, actually to use this benefit, not just for Christmas, but throughout the year, there's a lot of research that talks about, and it's why bonuses that are not structured based on, once a year, but are actually bonused on each month. It's why commission works really well, where people get commission on a monthly basis, keeps people very, very interested. And this idea that they never know when something that they do that's really good is going to be a tap on the shoulder and here's a £50 Amazon voucher, I think could be massively motivating. If you're not using this in your business, you're absolutely crazy, because like you say, if you think about the true cost of your business, by the time you take up all the taxes, and it's just gone from 70% to probably 90% of your business now, with thanks to Rachel Reeves. So you might as well just sprinkle the money around and keep your staff happy, because they're going to bring in a lot more than that in goodwill that comes back to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you know what I really love about these things is like £50 is the retail value. So for example, you bought not a gift voucher, but if you bought a present for £50 for your employee, maybe it was like a jumper or something that they wanted, you can claim VAT as a business, so that reduces the cost even further for you, and it's allowable from a corporation tax perspective, so it reduces your corporation tax bill. So by the time you've got the corporation tax relief and the VAT relief, that £50 is actually probably more like £28, £30 to your business cost.
Well, now you've pricked my ears up, Claire.
This is very interesting. So the only thing that as a director you've got to be aware of is that you can't give more than £300 of trivial benefits in a year.
In total in your business?
No, to each director. So you can't give an director more than £300 of trivial benefits. I don't believe there's any limits for employees, actually, but you have to be careful with the employees, because
you can sprinkle tiny little things on employees as much as you like.
Yeah, but it cannot be a reward for work or performance.
Really
so you
hard,
have
really
to
grey
be
area,
very careful there. But generally, this is intended for, like, if somebody gets married, if somebody has a birthday, if it's Christmas and you want to, give your staff a Christmas hamper, just make sure it's under £50. It's all these types of things, and it can't be more than £50 per time. So don't go and buy a Christmas hamper for £100. It's got to be £50, but get them a Christmas hamper and get them a New Year hamper too if you want to spend £100. That's where you've got to be quite clever with how you use these.
Thinking within the rules, but like making sure that we're using the rules. What if I want to take like, I don't know, it's 12 months, I'm doing my maths, what's 300 quid?
Yep.
If I want to take that full 300 quid, like just as a bonus as a director at Christmas, and, you know, but it's been taken in 6 tiny little things.
Yep.
Is that doable?
Yeah, so we do this, don't we? We do our shopping in Waitrose. So I go to Waitrose and I buy 6 £50 vouchers and I say thank you to myself every December.
So the key here is just make sure you buy them in £50 increments.
Absolutely, yeah, at £50
because
increments.
then it proves you can sprinkle them on yourself throughout the year.
Yeah,
this is sounding very Christmassy with all the sprinkling. I like it.
But this is literally every client that comes to me, I look at their accounts and note, and I've never seen a single person
Why aren't you sprinkling
take
yourself?
advantage of this. I'm like, it's Christmas, just go and buy Love to Shop vouchers or something and do all your Christmas shopping, or go and buy Amazon vouchers or something, like whatever you want. £300, just buy them in £50 intervals. You're supposed to keep a little log of who you've issued these to and when and things like that, to make sure that you're not going over the £50 trivial benefit allowance or the £300.
We should do a whole podcast on business owner benefits, shouldn't we?
There aren't that many.
I know there aren't, but I was just thinking about mileage as well as another one, but because there's other elements around that. But
yeah.
Interesting. Okie doke. Anything else, Claire?
I'm trying to think. So if you do give Christmas gifts over £50, or you do a staff party and you spend more than £150 on the event, then you either need to put that onto the employee's P11D, which means the employee pays tax and the employer pays national insurance, or there is something called a PSA, a PAYE settlement agreement, and basically that means that the employer can pay all the tax and national insurance on behalf of the employees. The employee isn't impacted by it at all. It doesn't impact their earnings, doesn't impact their tax bill. It's all borne by the employer. But just to give you a little bit of perspective of this, if you were to give somebody £100 voucher and pay the tax due via the PSA scheme, you would be paying £90 in tax for a £100 voucher.
I'm not. Do you know what? I'm not being pessimistic.
That's for a higher rate taxpayer.
I'm just not surprised anymore. Nothing surprises me.
Yeah. So
we don't live in a country anymore where we're trying to push people to be aspirational, and we just doesn't surprise me.
But more importantly, staff entertaining and staff allowances, as long as it's not excessive, and particularly be careful with the definition of excessive when it comes to directors. So you can't be going and eating in the Ritz every night and saying it's staff entertaining.
Every night but one night is okay.
But generally, it's seen as a cost of doing business and employing people, and therefore it's allowable for corporation tax, and you can generally claim VAT.
Well, there you go, everybody. So the one takeaway is make sure this Christmas you sprinkle yourself with tiny little things. Thanks, Claire. Let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So in this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra, I've got a book recommendation. It's not only just come out, but it was one of my favourite books that I've read in a while. It's by a guy called Morgan Housel, who's actually quite becoming more and more famous all the time. He's actually really famous for, this is not the book that I'm recommending, but his original book is called The Psychology of Money, and it's just gone on to continue to sell. I think even this Sunday, it was still in the Sunday Times. Top 10 books. It's just an ongoing top seller, and that came out years and years ago. The book I'm recommending is his second book, actually, which is actually totally different. Psychology of Money is a lot about investing, because he used to be a stockbroker. Same as ever there's an interesting quote that people often say, is that people often ask themselves what might change in the future. You know, they're trying to plan their business, their life around things that might change. They're trying to plan the future and various other things.
Call it what if analysis.
Do you call it what if? There you go. But actually, ironically, as we've proved with COVID and Brexit and everything else, invariably, we don't really know, and we can't really plan for change. The question we never ask is what never changes. And that's exactly what this book's about. The book is really, really just looks throughout history at the consistence in life. You know, what are the absolute consistents? And often the difference between the things that change and the things that don't are often behavioural. So you'll find that behavioural things never change. And I just find it's fascinating. It's quite a short read. It's quite punchy and easy to read, but it really helps you understand how you can, in many ways, plan for the future by being more predictable about the things in life that simply never change. They were the same 100 years ago, as they are today.
So this is quite fascinating, actually, because particularly for some of the bigger businesses that I work with, we do a lot of like scenario planning and what if analysis. And I'll be honest, none of the things we've ever planned for have actually ever happened.
Never happens.
So it's always,
I think business owners
like with COVID,
to think they know, don't they? They like to think they know what's going to happen and like to think they're planning for the future.
Well,
Are they
it's
really planning?
it's always like the worst case scenario, like what would happen if we lost our biggest customer or our top 5 customers, or, you know, that type of sort of Armageddon style scenario planning in the business. And it's always valuable to do because it gives you that understanding of where that cliff edge is.
Yeah.
What would be the point that we need to say, oh shit, this business is about to go under, type of thing. And it really does identify those points. And then we make a plan around it about how we would handle it, what are the trigger points we need to look out for, things like that. But
actually, maybe this is a question you need to start asking more with your clients, which is what never changes in your industry.
Yeah. And
how do you
never thought about
lean
it.
into what never changes? And actually, you can become extremely successful. The reason he particularly leans on this thing, it's not what the book's about, but in investing, this is the number one thing. You know, the person who is the best investor is often the laziest person that can simply be disciplined enough not to touch it.
Not to do
because
anything.
it's behaviour that fucks it up for you, basically. And I think that's a core message. But actually what he's found things throughout history that are not about investing that are just fascinating. So do check it out. Same as ever, really, really good book. There's not many books that I would read again and again, and this is actually one because it actually reinforces certain things in your life that you think, do you know what? That is a good bet to place because that is never going to change. It's a bit like I saw somebody talking about property recently, and that's just one of those things. It's never going to change, is it? You know, everyone's always going to need a roof over their head. It's a world that's never going to change.
I'm going to put this on my December reading list. So thank you very much, Simon.
I've got a copy, Claire. You take it on holiday with you. Anyways, thanks for joining us for another podcast. As always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your accountant and you'd like to chat with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, you can book a discovery call for free on the website. Claire will just have a quick chat with you about your business and do a health check of the finances there just to see if there's anything we can do to help you out. Do check us out on the YouTube channel. Check out all the back catalogue of the podcast. There's so much information there for you. Do rate, review and subscribe. And as always, if you could just get the little share button, text it to a mate and say, hey mate, did you know you could save these benefits this Christmas? And we'll see you again next week.